Alright guys, welcome back. In the previous episode, we headed out to the range and finally got to see what the Vihtavuori N550 could do in my Remington 700 chambered in 6.5 Creedmoor. Today is all about reviewing the information we collected during that range session. We are going to compare the recorded velocities against GRT's predictions, look at how closely the software matched that actually happened on the range, and see if there are any interesting areas worth investigating further. Just to be clear, today's video isn't intended as a step-by-step guide or loading advice. This is simply me documenting my own precision rifle project and sharing the observations I make along the way. So let's jump into the data.
Alright, so here's the project file, and I'm using exactly the same rifle profile that I've been working with throughout the series. The only update I've made since the previous episode is that I remeasured a selection of my brass, specifically my Lapua small rifle brass. And one thing that immediately stood out to me, guys, Lapua is just make the investment, buy once, buy right, get it done. And it's just how consistent the Lapua brass is. So I remeasured the case volume on a select few of the cartridges, and it came out to 42.48 grains of water capacity. Previously, it was, when it was still virgin brass, was 51.40 something. Can't remember exactly. Go back, watch the other videos. I'm sure it's in there. So I've updated the project file to reflect those measured values rather than the original virgin brass measurements. And everything else remained unchanged here from the previous project. The barrel dimensions are the same. The chamber information is unchanged. The bullet remains the same. It's still the Axe 135 grain brass monolithics, and the cartridge overall length I kept the same as well at 72 millimeters. And at this stage, I just wanted to eliminate as many variables as possible so that the only meaningful change between the two projects was the powder itself. And that leads me into seating depth. Before changing anything else, I wanted to keep the seating depth exactly where it was during the previous testing. There are different schools of thought when it comes to seating depth, particularly with monolithic bullets, and that's something I may explore later. But for now, I wanted today's comparison to focus purely on how the powder behaved under the same overall conditions. If the results continue to look promising, seating depth is certainly one of the variables I can investigate later on in this project. But for now, we keep everything as is. So, I started with importing the range data into GRT. Now, let's compare the model against what actually happened on the range. I've imported the velocities that were recorded during the ladder test rather than relying purely on the predicted values. This allows the software to better reflect the behavior that I actually observed during the testing. This is one of the features I really enjoy about GRT, is calibrating it to the actual values. It allows me to compare also the predicted performance with the real world observations. And I must say the predicted values were quite a bit higher than what I observed on the range. And at the end of the day, the software is only one part of the process. The range results are always the final reference point. And now that the measured data have been entered, let's have a look at the chart. Looking across the results, there are three areas that immediately stand out to me. I'm not calling these the perfect load or saying these are automatically the correct answer. There's simply three areas that I think deserve further investigation based on what I'm seeing here. These observations will still need to be confirmed with actual group testing on the range. That will be in the next upcoming video for next week. So like, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you guys there. But for now, These identified areas is ultimately where the rifle tells us that we are moving in the right direction. Let's start with the first area, these first three. So the first one was a cold bore shot, so it will be slightly faster than the rest, but I predict it would have been more or less in the same range as these three. We will naturally now confirm that with the group testing. We'll do speeds again. Then I wanted to talk about one of the tools GRT provides. It is the optimal barrel time analysis over there. One of the values shown is the estimated bullet lead time, which is the calculated amount of time the bullet spends traveling through the barrel before exiting the muzzle. The software also predicts the optimal barrel time, which represents a point where the barrel's vibration timing may be favorable for consistent bullet release. When these two values are close together, the software highlights that as an area that may be worth investigating further. It is important to remember that this is still a prediction generated by the model. The software helps us identify interesting areas like we see here, but only actual shooting can confirm whether the rifle agrees. So for this first node, let's quickly run through the OBT tool and see what it gives us. So if we look at this, and let's take this value. This is the 38.2. And select our OBT. We will notice that it gives us the measured velocity for the selected load, 38.2, and this was our real world value. If the model then computes the charge adjustment for that node, let's create a new copy of the file, and we have a look over here. So this would have now taken the charge, and the model then generates this BLT and OBT time. If you have a look there, this is, what is that? That is basically exactly the same value. And if we then use this charge, this will be our predicted muzzle velocity. The maximum pressures are still within. The burn propellant is not 100%, so it's not exactly where we'd like it to be. The load ratio is also a little bit low. However, if we're moving on to the second area over here, and we take a look at 39.2, 39, so maybe here in between 39.1, and we do the same. Once again, at 39 grains, this is our actual measured velocity, and we use the model to compute the charge. It gives us 38.92 grains. Let's copy that file again. Then you will see we've got 38.92 grains there. Just look at this BLT OBT again. That is basically exactly the same. Now, with this burn propellant of 100%, this is more in line where we'd like to be. This is also a very, very acceptable speed for the 6.5 Creedmoor. I'm very happy with this and very happy with that load ratio as well. And whether this ultimately becomes an accurate load still needs to be confirmed on paper. For now, it's simply another promising observation from the collected data. However, let's have a look at the third one as well, just for interest's sake. That would be around here, 39.4, 39.6, 39.8. I think if we take it in the middle, 39.6, do the same again, compute, 39.19. Then we once again see these values are extremely close together. We've got very much the same speed as the previous one, and it's just a little bit more load ratio, also 100%. So in my opinion, I think this one looks very, very promising for my specific load. And at this point, I now have 3 areas that I think are worth investigating further before making a final decision. However, I'm leaning quite heavily towards this one. And before I forget, and probably why all of you are here, this is the actual comparison between the N555 and the N550. As you will note, this is the original ladder test I did. All the variables are the same. The TPL or coal and the case-based ogive, primer, brass, everything was the same except the powders, just different powders. You will note there's a much higher charge for lower velocities than what I got now with the N550. It's quite a bit lower charge and the speeds are more in line of what I would expect for 6.5 Creedmoor. So I think, in my opinion, I made the right decision moving away from the N555 to the N550 for these specific Axe 135 grain monolithic brass bullets. Now, the next step is probably the one I'm looking forward to the most. We've now gathered the range data, we've reviewed the software predictions, and now it's time to see what the rifle actually prefers. In the next episode, we'll compare the groups that were shot during the ladder test and decide which of these 3 areas deserves further investigation. Only once I have that information will I decide where this project heads to next. Well guys, that wraps up today's data review. I really enjoy this part of the project because it's where all the information starts coming together. The range sessions gives us observations, the software gives us another perspective, and together they help point us towards the next stage of testing. I hope you've enjoyed following this journey as much as I've enjoyed documenting it. If you did, consider joining the Ballistics John members for exclusive behind the scenes content, uncut match footage, and early access to videos. Thank you very much for watching. Stay safe, and I'll see you guys in the next one.